Well, it is that time of month again. It's time for us to talk about sort of overlooked horror films here on Certified Forgotten. As always, I am half of your Matts because you can never have just one. You always need a spare in case something goes wrong. I am Matt Monagle. I am joined as always by my intrepid co-Matt, Matt Donato. How you doing, buddy?
Did you just call me spare parts?
I it sort of is up to the viewer as to which one of us is the spare Matt. We don't have to sort that out for themselves. It's subjective.
Yes, I like that. Open-ended insults on Certified Forgotten.
Yep, that's the beauty of the show. And as always, it's not just the two of us, although we might do that someday. I threaten that now just for funsies. Matt, will you please introduce our awesome guest for the week?
Absolutely. With us this week, we have horror film journalist, critic, and all-around phenomenal writer, Miss Marisa Mirabal. You may have read her stuff on Birth Movies Death, Slash Film, Fangoria, or just saying very intelligent things all across the internet that make me jealous sometimes. Marissa, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Hey guys, Matt and Matt.
Yeah, that won't be confusing at all later on.
Nope, totally. That's going to be fine.
So, Marissa, usually when we bring somebody in, we let them pick the. We've actually historically picked the movie, and kind of Matt Donato has done a really good job of matching them. We gave you a pick, and I'm excited. We'll talk about that in a minute because you kind of chose this one, so we're going to put a little extra burden on you to explain why. But before we get there, I want to know a little bit about your relationship to the horror genre, because we always bring in people that have kind of a cool connection to it, a personal connection. They're either horror critics like yourself that have actually written about horror exclusively at times, or people that have kind of a background in it. So what were the early days for you? Like, when did you start watching stuff and thinking like, oh, like these scary movies, I think this is what I kind of want to watch more of?
Sure. So I always grew up with horror elements in my life, or Halloween just in general, because my birthday is in October. So my parents would always throw me Halloween themed birthdays. And so this sort of folklore around, ghosts and haunted houses and zombies and witches, that was always very comforting for me as a kid because I just had so many positive memories associated with it. So I was already kind of, you know, from a very young age, from as early as I can remember, into more of the spooky types of entertainment and, kid related kid, like almost like kid friendly horror in a sense, was a huge fan of Beetlejuice and Little Monsters. Those were like my two favorite films growing up. In terms of more like mature horror, I would say it was around the time my older brother started bullying me a little bit, when I was probably about maybe 6 or 7 years old, and he would babysit me. He would try and scare me, and he would play he would play Child's Play, Halloween, and Poltergeist in order to, I guess just, what older brothers do, I suppose. And it worked for a little bit. I got pretty scared of Chucky, I'm not going to lie. And then Poltergeist really freaked me out too. But in order to not be scared, I learned how to disassociate and kind of deconstruct films from a young age. So, I would mute it and then be like, okay, well, obviously, since it's not that scary with the sound, off, I started to take more of appreciation for film scores. And so whenever I would watch movies later on, I would always pay attention to scores and the music in them. And then started thinking about more practical effects, like, okay, well, this is just a movie. And then you think about the people on set, the people that go into making these puppets. It's not real. Just basically trying to figure out any kind of way to break down these scary movies so I'm not scared anymore, whether that be the technical side of it or thinking about bloopers and things like that, So I had an appreciation for it, and then a fear as I got older, and then an appreciation. And then I loved it. And in whatever movie he wanted to kind of throw my way, I was like, okay, yeah, show me,
I,
So,
no, I think that's really interesting because I think that also plays into your writing, whether that's conscious or not. Because whenever I read your stuff, it's so much the production side of things. And you'll approach these topics and you'll do these articles about like the Foley sound and you'll do the costumes and stuff like that. Things that I've never even thought about on that deeper level where you're bringing all that expertise in. So I find that really interesting that there's a conscious reason why this is all happening and not just like out of nowhere.
Yeah, it was a defense mechanism from being kind of bully, like trying my older brother trying to bully me as a kid, but it made me have an appreciation for it. So yeah, I my a lot of my writing can be very technical. Appreciation for, like you said, scores and production design and Foley for sure. I'm a sucker for good production design. Honestly, that's one reason I love Halloween and horror so much, is I think like the set construction and also practical effects. I love practical effects. So big fan of, 80s horror films, and uh, I can always sort of appreciate that. And when, I see films now that come out in the horror genre that are saturated with CG, it's always a little bit of a bummer. But, that's such an underrated art form that I feel like can get some more love, even though it's like 2019. But it's still something that I really appreciate. So that's interesting that you pick up on it, but this is the reason why, essentially.
Yeah, no, I definitely pick up on it. And also, I like the fact that somebody else here is just as terrified, or was just as terrified as Chucky than me, because that was also my one of my first fears. That was one of my first horror villains that sent me honestly away from the horror genre for a while. So welcome to the club,
Well,
and thank you.
yeah, well, and they had these dolls back in the day called American Girl dolls that a lot of my friends were playing with, and I just I didn't want to have anything to do with them. I just kept thinking they were going to come alive at night. So yeah, I wasn't into it. I wasn't into dolls. And then that movie Dolly and Dolls were also really creepy. But I think another part of the horror genre, which is it's kind of sci-fi, but like one of the freakiest films I saw when I was younger was Fire in the Sky. Do y'all remember that? That was one that really did me
Mm.
into.
Yeah, I remember that one. I'm going to double back to what Donato was saying, because sort of the big theme of Certified Forgotten has been that Donato and I were fucking cowards when we were kids, and then we accidentally fell in love with the horror genre. But I can do both of you one better. I actually had one of those My Buddy dolls, like the dolls that the Chucky model was based
Oh
on.
wow.
And the reason that I never watched Child's Play until literally this year is because my cousin and I during sleepovers would like beat the shit out of it until we learned that Chucky was a thing, and we were convinced the doll was going to wake up and exact years worth of
Karma,
revenge on
you have
us.
angered my buddy doll.
No, like I had nightmares because it went in a black garbage bag in my garage. My dad put it up there, and I was like, I just know that I'm gonna it's gonna crawl its way out of the bag and like commando crawl its way across the hallway, and it was
Yeah, and
the
I mean,
most scary.
I recently did a piece about the new Child's Play and the practical effects with Todd Masters' team, and the puppetry and animatronics that go into that, both in the original and in the remake, are so impressive. It's terrifying because it's effective and it is practical, and that's one reason why we're talking about it so many years later, and it scarred us when we were kids. If we had seen that and if it were CG, I don't think it would have the same
No,
impact,
not at all.
So what you're saying is that the new Child's Play is a good movie. Is that what I'm
I'm
hearing?
saying the practical effects are great. I really appreciate it, and the robotics and the thought that they put behind it. We can have a more in-depth modern Child's Play conversation later on, but I mean, there are some components that I enjoyed about that film. Yeah.
I know what you're trying to do here, Matt. You're trying to trigger me right now.
Look, I think it's great, but it's not the movie that we are on the podcast to discuss. So
Nice dodge before you get me going on that. Good.
we'll finish this conversation at Fantastic Fest in a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
Give me like three
Um,
shots, and I'll just start screaming about the Chucky CGI at the end.
I don't think you need any alcohol to do
That
that,
is
to be
true,
perfectly
but
honest.
give it to me anyway, and it'll make it easier.
Fair enough. Fair enough. You've had a hard couple of weeks. So Marissa, one of the other questions we like to ask folks too is kind of talking about when they started to take ownership over movies, because a lot of horror fans are, they are introduced to the genre by somebody else, like you and your asshole brother. I'm sorry, he's probably a nice guy.
Oh no, we're
Um,
cool now.
but like, when did you start kind of developing a niche, or like, started watching horror films and you were like, these are my selections. I'm finding stuff at Blockbuster or whatever that I'm like, oh yeah, now this is my genre.
Sure. I would say probably around, maybe like 6, 7, 8, because we would go to Blockbuster, but I mean, having an older brother, I was introduced to um, movies that I probably shouldn't have seen so young, and also music that I was listening to like Metallica and The Doors and Elementary School, and yeah, like Led Zeppelin stuff. I feel like I was kind of introduced to things a little bit early on. Thanks to him. But yeah, I was always really intrigued too by the cover art of old school VHS, especially in the horror genre, because I felt like it was way more enticing and just intriguing to me than say comedy or even drama and
Hmm.
cartoons. I still remember vividly the VHS cover for House, and it was just like this severed hand that's ringing the doorbell, but I always like that scared me. The covers would freak me out and make me want to watch the movie, and then sometimes the movie wouldn't even hold up to the cover. Like that's really not that scary of a film. It's actually more comedy. So I think around probably 8 years old, and that was also around the time too when I was reading a lot of Goosebumps and scary stories to tell in the dark. So it was just kind of, I feel like aspects of horror and spooky entertainment has always just sort of been threaded throughout my life in various ways. But when I started to kind of own it and embrace it and sort of tell my friends about it and try and get them on board, probably like 8.
Probably like 8. No, I love how that answer is way younger than I actually thought it was going to be.
Yeah, I was. Yeah.
No, which is great in the best way, because I was going to say, like, I didn't start owning horror and like actually being able to recommend it not until like my like 20s, like early
Oh
20s.
wow!
Like that's when I'm not joking when I say I avoided the horror genre for a long time, and it just wasn't my
Wow!
thing. So yeah,
Yeah.
and I like the VHS conversation, the VHS cover conversation, because we actually had that with Melissa Kay as well, your friend over there in
Oh
Austin,
yeah! I love Melissa.
and she said the same, basically the same thing you did, and her pick was Night of the Creeps. And so
That's
again,
a
like
great one.
those covers are just so important to a horror film, whether they're good or not. That artwork and that colorfulness and the playfulness still got us to watch them every time. I mean, I can still remember Return of the Living Dead, that kind of like graffiti zombie graveyard kind of artwork. I love that, and that's
Yeah.
another one that drew me to it immediately. And I ended up finding one of my favorite horror movies ever through it. Matt Monagle, you know what other movie has a great DVD cover in the horror genre?
Oh, just do it.
Demon Wind.
Thank you. We got it out of the way early.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like especially being a little kid, you're a very visual person. So I'm not picking up the back of a VHS cover and reading the synopsis. I'm looking at the artwork first and foremost, and whatever draws me to that, is usually just yeah based on aesthetics. So that's how I got my start. I would pick the creepiest covers I could find, be like, "Ooh, can I handle that movie? What's that movie?" So.
Well, moving that a little bit forward to today, before we talk about the film itself, where do you get your good recommendations now? Where do you find that, since we don't have the luxury anymore of kind of thumbing through the aisles of the local video store, sort of we do, I guess, if you go to Vulcan Video, but where do you find that you're getting a lot of your best recommendations? Where do you find you're hearing about titles and finding things to take chances on?
Yeah. Well, we're very fortunate. I'm based in Austin, so I'm very fortunate to have, Vulcan Video. I love video, so it's cool that I can still have the opportunity to go to the video store, which I do, and browse the horror sections, which they have a pretty good selection at each of those stores. But um, other than that, I'd probably say Friends, Critic Friends, keeping an eye on everyone's reviews and what they're talking about. Even if I'm just kind of a wallflower on social media, sometimes I do like to kind of keep an eye out for what people are talking about or what they recommend. And, I'm really bad about it, but I've been trying to get better about Letterboxd, using that as a resource. I know a lot of people do, but I've been forcing myself to kind of find recommendations on there as well. So mostly just people in the scene and local video stores, and yeah. online.
Yeah, no, I think Letterbox is a
Yeah.
great one to use a little bit, just as long as like the people you're following. Like I've curated my list to only follow the people that I know are going to give me those deep dives. Like I love following Rob Hunter, one of our friends, because he'll always be checking off these weird out of nowhere, well, not out of nowhere and weird, just Korean horror that I haven't seen yet or heard of yet. So yeah, I think Letterbox is great for that kind of stuff. But it's a double edged sword because then I post like my review of Clown NATO and I get literally some dude wrote like a 2 paragraph fuck you to me today because it
Wow.
was, I gave it like 1.5 stars. And in my review, I kind of wrote, I'm like, it's a mess of an independent horror film. And they try to have fun, but I'm like, it never gets there. And then I complimented a few things. This guy like basically read the first sentence and he's like, you're what's wrong with indie horror appreciation. And these are people making unique movies and you're just out here trying to destroy them. And I'm like, buddy, I'm like the last person you should be telling that to. Like, look back at what else I've rated here, man. So yeah, like Letterbox still has a little bit of that like troll culture on it, and it always like seeps in a little bit.
Yeah, I'm not into that kind of toxicity. I mean, everyone has their
Nah,
opinions, but that's kind of lame. Um, yeah, I mean, Letterboxd is great. I'm just bad at keeping up with it. But it is good because different, especially in the critics circle and the writers circle, people have their different tastes. Like Matt, I'm totally into Black Coat Starter. I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole right now, but like I get like I'm into moody,
Yay.
atmospheric horror as well. Comedic horror. That's one reason I chose this film because I kind of wanted to branch out a little bit from what I typically watch, but um, it is cool to kind of talk to other people in the scene who have specific subgenre tastes, that usually aren't my jam, but I'm open to it and want to see why they love it.
Well, that is a perfect segue then, I think, to talking about today's movie, which you already know because it's on the title of the podcast, but it is Hansel and Gretel Get Baked. Gosh, you know what? Actually, Donato, can I kick this one over to you? I think this is a
no, it's
description.
gonna be way more fun if you have to do
No,
this.
man.
I want to hear your take on Hansel and Gretel Get Baked.
Okay, all right, hold on. Okay. The fairy tale that is Hansel and Gretel has haunted the children of our generation and countless generations before us. This movie is nothing like that. It is about a pair of young California siblings with awkward sexual tension, who discover a witch played by Men in Black and the Practice star Laura Flynn Boyle, who is growing a particular strand of weed called Black Forest. If you don't get it, this is probably not the movie for you. What happens is Hansel and Gretel get trapped in the witch's house, and does she end up in an oven? I don't know. You'd have to watch. I think if you are familiar with the Hansel and Gretel story, you kind of know the beats that they're going to play with. It is a movie that takes the bones of that and tries to make a million weed puns on top of it, and it succeeds in that regard quite a bit. So there we go. Is that how you describe it, Donato?
Yes, I like the disdain in your voice that I knew was going to be there. So that's really why I wanted you to do it.
I don't want to know. So all right, we'll get into this, but I don't I don't hate the movie as much as I probably sound like I hate it. But I want to start with you actually, Matt, before we talk to Marissa. I want to start with you because this is one of the things we have, like this giant working list of movies that have 5 or less reviews on Rotten Tomatoes. It's a hard thing to just pull out of thin air, so we actually have to like build a database of them. What you had reviewed this, of course, you're one of the people on there. What got this on the list for you? What made you think this is a great addition for a future guest on the show?
So I think a few reasons kind of come together on this. And number one, this is one of those IFC movies. I think it was IFC or Tribeca. One of those movies that they released before IFC Midnight got the notoriety that it not now has. I feel like every IFC Midnight movie now that comes out, you at least know about it, you hear about it, and people are talking about it. This was one of those releases when they were still finding their footing and still kind of coming up in the distribution scene. And for some reason, whatever or not, I was one of the people that was always reviewing their stuff, but not a lot of other people were. So I just know for myself, I could go back and look at all these old school IFC Tribeca releases, and I knew that no one has touched them for years. So, I mean, number one, that was an easy way for me just to go back and just go through my Rotten Tomatoes and find all these films to put on our list. But then also, as you said before, it's kind of got a pretty solid cast. It has a weird enough idea. There's enough. I'm not going to call it vibrancy, but there's enough in there to make it unique. There's enough richness in the story that it wasn't just another indie horror flick. I mean, we're going to encounter those as we do this, obviously. We're going to encounter those films that are low budget and not always the best because we are reviewing films that have 5 or less reviews on Rotten Tomatoes. There's a reason some get ignored. Sometimes it's not the best reason, though. And I feel like Hansel and Gretel Get Baked falls under that not best reason. Everyone just assumed it was VOD in a time when VOD had a stigma on it. So it was immediately looked over. Now VOD is fine. VOD is it's one of the only ways that some films are even going to get released. So that stigma's gone, and that's why you have so many more people reviewing these films. But yeah, I wanted to get Hansel and Gretel on the list because I liked it when I first saw it. I feel like it got unfairly overlooked because it was VOD in a time when VOD was not known for what it is now. And yeah, it's a fucking weird fairy tale kind of riff that gets baked.
All right, okay. So now we have why it was on the list. Good reasons, all. Actually,
Yeah.
really appreciate the logic there. Marisa, you're up. We gave you a list. You picked this one. Tell us why.
Um, Kind of what we were talking about a little bit earlier. It's just a little bit out of my wheelhouse. I mean, I love horror comedy, don't get me wrong, but it's not something that I necessarily go to all the time. So I just, the cast struck me, and then I watched the trailer, and it looked like a pretty good production quality. And I grew up reading the Grimm fairy tales, and I just liked a stoner spin on them. So I thought it'd be fun, and it struck my fancy out of the other ones. So yeah, I went with that one.
Okay, all right. So, what did we think?
What did you think? Wait, I want to ask you first. What did you think when you first saw like the trailer and looked at it, and like what were you expecting versus what you got?
What was I?
Oh, I actually, sorry, I want to ask that to Matt because Matt is totally like, this is not his kind of movie. And when you picked it, I was like, oh, this is going to just ruin Matt's day. So I'm just curious what Matt you were expecting when you tweeted or you like messaged me and you're like, of course, this is the one we're watching. And then,
Aw.
and then like you watched it though, and you did admit you didn't hate it as much as you did. So like, what was your expectation and what did you get?
Yeah, I'll say that the trailer thing actually, I didn't watch the trailer for this. I'm not a huge fan in general of watching trailers for movies I know I'm going to watch, which is a whole other conversation. But I'm pretty sure I wasn't sure what to think. To me, Hansel and Gretel Gets Baked kind of has that early VOD, like you said, stigma to it, particularly like early Netflix, where it was a platform that couldn't afford a ton, but it could afford a lot of cheap stuff. And so when you think of these new fly-by-night platforms that come up, like things like what Crackle used to be, or when Amazon Prime got into the business, whenever one of these people, these startup companies get together and be like, we bought a package of movie rights and we have one original show that stars, God, I don't know, some Z-list Disney celebrity. Like, this is the kind of movie I expect they have in that rotation. It's just something that was cheap that they could afford. That was my expectation going in. And I will say that while this movie is inexpensive, the experience of watching it, I never hated it. Like, after we were done, my wife was like, so what'd you think? I was like, I didn't hate it. And that sounds like a negative thing. But as you said, Matt, like, this is a movie that it runs more towards horror comedy. It veers a little bit more towards like the low budget, which isn't necessarily a bad thing in my book, but there's definitely a bunch of us California people got together and made a movie in California vibe, which is super different than a bunch of us anywhere else in the world got together and made a movie. It doesn't hit on a lot of the points that I would normally like, but the humor isn't as forced as I thought it was going to be. The visuals are fine for the budget that is working with. It feels like something you could watch with a crowd or watch under the influence and actually have a good time with.
I respect that. Okay, because I knew coming into this was one that wasn't on the top of your list, and I knew it wouldn't be. And that's kind of also why I did put it on our database because I'm like, I really want to get his take on it, and not even just like masochistically make you watch it. I did genuinely want to know like what you would think about a film like this, and kind of discovering it for the first time. So that's very interesting. And you did watch it with your wife?
No, God, no. She never watches
Oh.
anything. She doesn't watch any of this stuff with me. Are you kidding me?
Well, you said you. All right, never mind.
No,
I was
no.
like, she watched it too. I'm like,
No. You've met my wife. Both of you have. You know better than that.
this is fair.
No,
Yeah.
she doesn't watch it with me. She just asks me after. She reads the Wikipedia summary and then asks me later how I enjoyed it and tries to compare that to what she read in the Wikipedia. So I don't even know if there's a Wikipedia for this or not. But no,
Of
like
course.
it's we'll talk about more of it in a second. But I will say that I do. You've talked a lot in previous episodes, Matt, about how passionate you are about this kind of tier of horror where it's people that are getting together and they don't have the resources to do something spectacular. So they try and do something that they feel really passionate about. I think that this kind of falls into that bucket, even though it's a ton of really like low hanging fruit weed jokes. It's clearly something by a group of people that were like, this is our shot to just sort of step outside of where our careers are headed and make a movie for ourselves. And I like that. I like watching movies where I feel like the people involved give a shit about whether the movie's any good or not. I think this group of filmmakers clearly did. They clearly tried really hard to make this a good film.
And I think, yeah, so I'll take my stance on it first. I stand by my positive review from a while ago. I kind of, reread it a little bit, read the beats, and I still agree with the fact that it's a fun stoner take on a children's story. But the way they do it and the actors that they actually get to play the stoners, they lean into the concept and the gimmick, I guess we can call it, so hard between Laura Flynn Boyle as the witch, and she is so evil, and the way that she is so nonchalant about how she's a murderous witch who eats drug, not people who buy her drugs. I, she is so good at it. But then also looking at the other side of things, you have Molly C. Quinn as Gretel, and she is stoned for a lot of the movie because she is one of the quote unquote stoners who is addicted to Black Forest. And also, it's not easy to play a stoner and it's not easy to play a drunk person and be natural about it. I feel very much as someone who has smoked before and who has been around people smoking that Molly Sequin kind of nails that vibe in the way that like she just kind of like floats for the first half of the movie and is so just kind of caught up in Black Forest. And after it wears down, you see the other side of her persona because she's no longer high. I like the duality. I think the cast carries a lot of weight here, but I think it's also very fun to watch.
I mean, I agree. I thought it was pretty fun. I was pleasantly surprised. I just went in with an open mind, looking for a good time, and I had fun with it. I think the characters were, we're not talking about a ton of depth here, or there weren't even really there wasn't really an arc, so it's not that kind of a journey. It's a pretty standard formulaic stoner comedy, but that's okay because there's aspects of it that are silly and stereotypical, and I did enjoy there were a few Easter eggs that alluded to the actual fairy tale, which I appreciated. And, whether that be Gretel's attire, I really liked her costume choices, the way that she was dressed. And then that really played into the character too. And then, there was, just side note, have y'all read the fairy tale before? Just curious.
I mean,
The Grimm
a
fairy tale?
long time ago. Like I haven't read it recently. I didn't reread it, so it's not as fresh in my mind. But
I read so many great illustrated classics when I was a kid that I have no idea what I've read or not read anymore.
Well, so I read this one before watching the movie, just out of curiosity in terms of comparison. And I did like how they took a couple things. So even like the strain of weed, Black Forest, that's in the first line of the fairy tale. They live in this dark forest, this Black Forest. And another fun thing was that like the dogs in the film have glowing red eyes, and the witch in the fairy tale, her eyes would glow and she could smell children. Yeah, little things like that were kind of sprinkled throughout the movie, which I always appreciate, if when you're dealing with any type of adaptation, any kind of little you know, reference to the source material is always fun, how they play into that. And then, you know, the breadcrumb scenes, like how they utilize that in the film as well. So I think they did an overall good job. I would have liked to see a little bit more of that. Um, but for what it was, you know, I enjoyed it.
All right, I want you to expand on that if you don't mind, because in my recollection, Hansel and Gretel, the story is really short and really simple. It's basically they get lost, they show up at the house, it's a witch, they push her in the oven, and they're done. So reading that story, especially when you were thinking about the movie, how much there is there for a filmmaker to work with? Like how much substance is there in the grim fairy tale that somebody can actually expand upon? Because we've seen a million Hansel and Gretel movies. But as we were talking about earlier, I don't feel like any of them have ever actually managed to really tell a story that's super compelling. And I always wondered, is that on the short story itself?
Well, I mean, we did get Hansel and Gretel witch hunters,
Thank you, Matt.
which I like. That's actually not a joke. I actually like that movie, and I know it has nothing to do with actual Hansel and Gretel. But
I think I read your review for that too. I'm aware. I mean, that's a good question. It is very short. It's not a very long tale by any means, and there's a couple of different variations of it, but ultimately what struck me kind of interesting reading it as an adult was that their mother, in the version I read, it was the later version, so it was technically their stepmother. They're preparing for the winter and they don't have enough food, so she tells her husband, well, we just need to get rid of our children. Essentially, we're going to lead them out into the woods, we're going to leave them with some bread, and they'll figure it out on their own, and then we'll just abandon your kids in the woods. So that concept in and of itself, it's like, geez, if you can't afford or, to take care of your children, just leave them in the forest to fend for themselves. So it's pretty gnarly, just cutthroat right from the beginning. And then the father's just, he feels bad about it. So um there's this moral conscience, I think, that plays into the tale with the father and the stepmother. And so the kids go out, Hansel and Gretel go out, and then they actually find their way back, but then they're sent to the woods again, and then that's when they encounter the witch. And it's actually a happy ending, which I was surprised. I don't really remember because it's been a long time since I've read that, and because those fairy tales are so grim.
hey,
You know, oh,
ooh,
oh, uh, pun intended. But anyway, like I figured it would be a darker ending, but it was actually a happy ending, both in terms of the witch dying and the mother or the stepmother dying as well. And then the kids make it back to their father and they just kind of live happily ever after. And in the film, they don't really explore the parents at all. They're out of town from the beginning. I don't even think that they're on screen at all. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't remember seeing.
no, we don't see the parents at all. This is just the stoners.
Yeah, so they're out of town, and then we're with Hansel and Gretel and their story. So that was kind of interesting too. Like there's no parental involvement at all. Um, but I feel like there's a couple of different angles you could take with it. But there isn't a whole lot. There are some like mythology behind it. Like, there's like a talking duck that helps them cross the river to safety, which is really random. Um, but yeah, I mean, there's some stuff
That
that
would I was gonna say that would have been a great like stoner hallucination if they worked that into the movie. Like, how did they miss out on having a talking duck who helps them?
I know. Instead of having the music notes float through the air, just have like a talking duck kind of guide them to the witch's house or something. Yeah.
That would have been amazing. Okay, well now I know that they didn't conceptualize everything they should have from the short story, but I still think in my mind, I think it plays enough with the food and the food elements that go into Hansel and Gretel Get Baked, where for me at least, it's drawing enough from the short story and it's drawing enough in there where you have adapted successfully a children's story into this kind of not even raunchy, but definitely more mature themed take on a Mother Goose kind of tale.
Sure.
Well, let me ask the two of you a question then about like the title. Let's talk about the title real quick. Do you think that calling this movie Hansel and Gretel Get Baked does the movie a favor? Do you think that that works in its advantage, or do you think that works as a disadvantage? Because there is kind of this whole subgenre of like weed horror that became popular in the 2000s, and I mean, there's an audience for it, but it also immediately hamstrings your quality. You know, people know the type of movie it's going to be or have assumptions about the type of movie it's going to be. Do you think if this had a more conventional name and walked in, people might have given it more of a chance? Do you think that the title is, I think I know where Donato's going to fall on this. Do you think the title is like the key to the whole thing? What do you think of Hansel and Gretel Get Baked as the title for this movie?
I mean, I'll just go real quick, yeah, because you already know my answer here. I think it's named exactly how it should be. It leans into the get baked aspect of the story. I mean, that's what it's selling. It is selling a stoner recreation of this tale. So why hide that? You're gonna get the audience that you're intended for here. You're gonna give them the story that they're already expecting and that they want, and it does lean into the ridiculousness of it all because that's the kind of movie it wants to be. It wants to be that B movie, that midnighter that is, it doesn't go up in smoke exactly, but one of those midnighters that you can watch and have fun with. So I think it all plays in. I mean, like, yeah, gets baked, it's a pun in itself. Obviously the witch gets baked in the story, like all that stuff tying into it. I think the name is kind of spot on for what it should be.
I agree. Yeah. I think it leans in, and if it were something um that wasn't a pun with, the stoner storyline, but also the fairy tale as well, it might come off like it's taking itself too serious, and then therefore the tone might get lost a little bit, or the expectations wouldn't necessarily be there. And I think it works really well. Honestly, I like the kind of the double meaning behind it. I think it works,
Okay.
and it caught my attention. And that's not even my type of genre, but I mean, it seemed fun. So
All right. Okay. Then I'm happy to be outvoted a little bit on the title because I don't know, I would have loved to have seen them maybe not as heavily to the humor in it and let people maybe come across it a bit more organically. I think there's plenty of movies with Hansel and Gretel as the title. What's one more? Just throwing it into the mix.
Because
But
right.
yeah, but there are
I
so
understand
many
where you're
though.
coming
That's the
from.
thing. How are you going to set yours apart? Oh, well, ours is a stoner comedy. Let's make sure everyone knows.
Well, I mean, like they can't all be titled Hansel and Gretel Witch Hunters,
I mean,
Donato.
listen, there's only one Hansel and Gretel Witch Hunters, and it's a shame that there's only one because we deserve a sequel.
Well,
Well,
talks.
when I read your review, Matt, I forgot that there was a surge of Hansel and Gretel
Yeah, right?
adaptations years ago. I totally forgot. So that was another reason I kind of wanted to pick this one, um, because it was just sort of a blind spot for me in a lot of different ways.
Yeah, and the thing is, I think that there's probably, and we talked a little bit, Donato, before you came on about Oz Perkins' upcoming Gretel and Hansel. You can't really call it a remake, but an adaptation. And the thing is like I feel like there's a moment here where you could make a movie, setting aside kind of the weed sensibilities in it, but the idea of like, the old and the affluent literally trying to consume the young and the young pushing them into their own fire. Like politically, it's the sort of smart cultural biting satire that would combine with such a entertaining, fluffy veneer that you can kind of push those two things together and come up with something really sharp if you're in the mindset for that. So, when we did have that wave, I saw a couple of them and I was just, now I've seen a couple of them and I'm surprised. I'm like, none of these are really going for broke in the way that I think they could have with the subversive element of horror. And I wonder if that'll open this narrative up to more adaptations in the future outside of just Gretel and Hansel, because that generational divide, that like consumption stuff, like there's a there. And if one of the things that we've seen from the Toronto International Film Festival reviews is this idea of like eat the rich and how prevalent that is. I'm like, oh, literally, that's the Hansel and Gretel story. Use that.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, it is.
Nobody?
Yeah.
Nobody's going to react
let
to
our
that.
guest
Come
go
on,
for that.
guys.
She has something to say first, but
No, I mean, that makes me think of Society too. Which, you know, cannibalism in general is just, it's not one of those subgenres that I usually gravitate towards. But I mean, I think it's a really valid point. But then there's also that, you know, age old sort of, you know, when you listen to or read folklore tales, don't trust people as easily. Um, you know, even if they're adults, like, don't listen to people so much. Like Hansel and Gretel, you know, they go to the witch's house and she says everything's fine. And even in the movie, because she's an older woman, people don't think that she's a threat. So it's interesting when that's sort of played out in a nefarious and dangerous situation. So those types of tales that are meant to warn kids, as they mature, I kind of like that aspect of it too. Like,
Hmm.
you know, there is that class sort of mentality, but also just like you can't trust people, you know, that you think you can, I guess. And, you know, there's this deception behind it. So, and I think they play well into that. And the even, I mean, honestly, like how they went, how they approached the witch and how she consumed her victims. I kind of liked it. I thought the gore was pretty good, honestly, for the budget. It was pretty gnarly.
Yeah, I did want to
Yeah,
get
then
there.
we got to tap you in for the gore.
Yeah,
Yeah,
of
talk to me
course.
about the
No, the
gore.
gore was definitely a high point, and I like the fact that the gingerbread in this gets baked story is basically first Hansel and, well, sorry, not Hansel. It's Gretel and her boyfriend Ashton are baked on Black Forest, and they run on Black Forest. So the first thing is like, oh, we have cookie mix and we're going to make gingerbread cookies. So you have the allusion to the
Mhm.
gingerbread and you're like, all right, how is this going to play in? Obviously, Laura Flamboyle's witch does not live in a gingerbread house in the middle of California or wherever they are. It's a very nice house and with a very big weed growing kind of factory warehouse in the basement. But you still get the gingerbread house in that Ashton is so high and such a stoner and he's like being so not thinking in the moment that there's a
He's got the
Yes, exactly. He has the munchies 1000%, and he sees a gingerbread house, and Laura Flynn is like, yo, don't eat that gingerbread, dude. Just like sit there for a few minutes. I'll be right back. And what's the first thing he does? He eats the gingerbread house, immediately cursing him. And I like the fact that basically she eats him back. Like, that's the punishment. The punishment is, all right, well, you ate my gingerbread. I'm going to now eat you. And she starts like flaying his skin away. You get the whole like, he thinks that she's gonna perform fellatio on him, and he's like, I just don't want to look. And she's like, okay. So of course she just stabs him with like a meat fork, and she pulls an eye out and just eats it right in front of the camera, like full on bites into the eye like it's a freaking candy or something like that. And yeah, I like the gore in those scenes. I like that it goes right for that, and it's pretty vicious for a low budget film in that sense.
Yeah, it really is.
I will say that you skipped over a little bit, but the my favorite part in the entire movie is when he hacks into her little gingerbread house, and the first thing that he sees is her Nazi
Right.
passport. I was like, all right,
Yeah.
like I see what kind of movie you're going to be, and I'm not entirely disinterested in it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I forgot about that for a quick second. And then, yeah, when I was rewatching it last night, I was like, oh, right. Like, why? She also has the Nazi paraphernalia there for no reason.
Yeah. So random. And even like the whole theme of, you know, eating and cannibalism and all that stuff. Did y'all pick up on the product placement with like the Cheesecake Factory was randomly mentioned like 2 or 3 times? And then did y'all get, I mean, I don't know. It was just kind of funny. Maybe they did craft service for the
I was going
movie
to
or
say, hey,
something.
they had to make that budget somewhere. And if Cheesecake Factory wants to be associated with cannibalism, that is their own choice. I mean,
They seriously mentioned it like 3 times. And then the whole the
well,
Tabasco too. Like there was just some weird product placement that I kind of noticed that stuck out. It was
Well,
kind of
even
strange.
think about the gingerbread package is a Betty Crocker. Like, just you can the red box is right in camera, and you see like the Betty Crocker kind of like instant gingerbread thing. Like, yeah, again, you got to make that money somehow. You got to get someone to produce the film, and I don't know if these companies want to be associated with the Munchies. I guess that's definitely a positive aspect, but then you get the rival drug dealer coming to storm the gates of the witch's house, and
Uh,
he gets fauceted to death, basically hung upside down, and gets stuck with a hose faucet that Laura Flynn Boyle turns on. So again,
Fun.
yeah, you
Hmm.
get some fun gore moments, you get some fun gore beats. People turn into zombies out of nowhere. Like this is
That was so
yeah,
random.
exactly. And random is like the key word, but it's that fun off the rails way where it
Yeah.
brings something definitely different, and it plays with the dark aspect. I mean, the whole thing about grim
Mhm.
fairy tales is we always remember like the Mother Goose fairy tales as kids, and we get the watered down version. But grim fairy tales are exactly that. They're grim, they're dark. There is a reason why they are kind of morbid and macabre. And I like that this treatment, the getting stoned, get baked treatment, very much goes into the dark humor and the very, very black sensibilities of the actual grim fairy tale.
Well, we haven't talked. We've kind of talked about her a little bit, but I want to spend some time talking about Laura Flynn Boyle too, because this is actually the penultimate movie of her career. I hope that's not true, but
Yeah.
she's only done one other film since then. This obviously she's cutting loose in a way that you know any actor can do, but she's actually doing it well, which is that balancing act. What do we think about her performance, Marissa? I'll start with you.
I enjoyed it. I thought she was a really fun, version of a witch, a female witch, and utilizing different aspects of femininity in a sense. I think I mentioned this a little bit earlier. She was playing into the innocent old woman. She leans into the seductive older woman. And then which was kind of a whole weird scene when it was the friend, one of the people who went missing, the girlfriend went to go look for her at the witch Agnes's house, and there's this whole awkward sexual vibe between them, which was very random, and I don't really know if it worked very well, but she was just kind of leaning into all these different aspects of being a woman, I suppose. And then yeah, I thought that was kind of interesting, but I just liked her. I liked her approach. She was um very deceptive, but also funny in her delivery and her puns. So there were moments of comedy that, as the viewer, you're in on it, or she knows and her victims don't, that I think work really well in terms of just silly dialogue and very, straightforward. It's not super deep or anything like that, but I think her performance was good both on a comical level and also serious at times too. I would like to see her in more dark roles because I mostly know her from Twin Peaks as Donna Hayward, which I love her character in that, but I would totally love to see her explore more within the genre and maybe a little bit more of like a serious film
Yeah, I
too.
think that my favorite part about her performance is the way that she always is like 10 steps ahead of whoever she's talking to, because most of the time she's talking to stoners who have no idea what's going on to begin with. You mentioned the girlfriend coming before to find who's gone missing in the witch's house, and that's in addition to Gretel. So Gretel's boyfriend goes missing, then there's like an interim drug dealer in there, and the interim, his name is Manny, I believe. The interim drug dealer goes missing too. We know that's because he's gone to the witch's house. There's some strong arming going on, and he ends up dying. He turns into the zombie. But now you have Gretel and Manny's girlfriend going together, and that is where the scene happens between the sometimes awkward sexual tension. Why is this happening? It's just a hot young actress and girl trying to find her boyfriend. And yes, okay, so why is Laura Flynn Boyle just immediately attracted to her? It's kind of a reach, but still the way Laura Flynn Boyle leans into being this witch and leans into being this evil, evil entity that does not care about anyone and is peddling weed. And it's part businesswoman and part like satanic, just fucking from the underworld kind of role that she is loving.
Mhm.
You can tell she's having fun with it. You can tell she's, pun intended, eating it up.
Yeah.
And that's my favorite part. Whenever she goes in for the kill and she just has that huge smile on her face, and she just gives one of those like, "Oh, sweetie," like kind of like little puns that they always work to me. So she's a big reason why you're watching this movie. I like some of the actors in it. The supporting characters, you're not going to get much lasting value there. The girlfriend of the drug dealer, she's kind of ditzier. She's the one eating the Skittles and ruining. Sorry, the Skittles are breadcrumbs in this film. So when they go downstairs into basically this hydroponic
Mm-hmm.
weed maze where they're trying to get out of the basement now that's so big, and you're using Skittles to get your way back. Yeah, you get the one girl eating the Skittles and she's kind of ditzy, like, "Oh, Skittles, you'll always save me," crap like that. Like, all right, we get it. You're stoned, you're hungry, whatever. But I really do think between Lara Flynn Boyle, Molly C. Quinn, and even the guy who plays Hansel, who Michael Welch, who he's the more straight edge character. He is the virgin, and that's comes up because he tastes better. But the way that they all lean into their respective parts, it's enough character acting that gets me through the scenario. It's enough character acting that plays up what needs to be played up, but without ever getting egregiously hammy. So between those three actors, and again, Laura Flynn Boyle, just relishing in the dark and the devious, that's where I win here. That's where it wins me over.
Yeah, if you look through the cast a little bit, I think one thing that sort of stands out about this, I found myself thinking a bit about High Moon or Howlers, another movie that has been featured on this show. And sort of the dividing line, I think, is that this is a cast of kind of like working actors in the most blue collar kind of way. Like a lot of these people are doing a lot of television and they're doing a lot of DTV and they're paying their bills. And, they're not bad actors. They're just people that are probably never going to jump or are going to take a while to jump to that next tier in their career. But they're putting in solid work around the edges because of that. And I think that's what separates this from sort of, again, that DTV crowd of other movies that are sort of, wannabe versions of this, is that everybody here there's an established level of competency in a lot of the performances. They're uneven at times. Some of them are just not that good, but like there's a sense that like these are all people that know how to come in and do their work. Whereas a lot of movies you end up watching in this tier of films, you're kind of like, was that somebody's uncle? Was that like, did they give the caterer a scene because they couldn't pay him? Is that why this guy's in the movie? At least with this, you're like, all right, I understand. These are all actors. These are all people that know how to act, and the movie is better for it.
And I mean, you even get Carrie Elwes in the first scene
Mm-hmm.
as a meter man who I totally forgot was even in the movie. And
I forgot. I got to interrupt you there
yeah,
because I watched this over 2 days. I saw the opening credits. I went, oh, Carrie Elwes. Did not recognize him in the first half. Turned it on the next day. Finished watching it. His name came
Yeah.
on the credits. And I was like, what? So this totally forgot that he was in this from beginning credits to end credits.
yeah, and I think again, but that speaks to the level of the kind of film it is,
Mm-hmm.
where you're getting an actor such as Carrie, and he's playing an intro part that's just kind of a one-off to basically set up the fact that things are not right, but you're still getting him to do it, and he's still agreeing to be in this film. So yes, versus the Howlers, High Moons of the world, where you're getting the who am I? Why am I blanking on the name of the actor? Sean Patrick Flannery to play like the mayor in a very bumbly role that kind of, okay, why'd you take this? You're not really giving it your all. In Hansel and Gretel Get Baked, you get the big name actor having fun for a scene and doing their thing, getting in and out, and it doesn't hamper the film. It's the fun kind of cameo work that I think is a good mark on a film that knows how to be that camp and also bring in a name that kind of hooks you and use them in a way that you never would guess.
Yeah, and he's unrecognizable. When I went back and watched the beginning of it, honestly, and I was like, oh, that's where he is. Because when I first started it, I didn't even notice him or recognize him at all. But then again, that might be due to other things. But yeah, it was.
But yes, those other things you haven't brought that up yet. How did that help you? Because I am extremely curious.
Okay, so I am not an avid smoker. I haven't smoked in a long time. However, when I chose this movie, I thought it would be fun to revisit and, get high while watching the movie. And yeah, it hit me kind of hard when I first started it. So I went back later and I was like, okay, that's where he was. But I mean, I just laughed and giggled a lot. It was just ridiculously silly. I picked up on the music and the lyrics were so were so ridiculous. Every single theme in that film just relates to weed and stoner culture so much in every single way, and it it's just I don't know. I mean, you don't have to be high to watch it. It was just a gimmicky thing. I figured why not, you
But
know.
and I feel that I don't know. When I watched it again last night, I feel like it was a movie that was intended for that though, because
Oh
there's
yeah, I'm sure.
there's stoner comedies and there's films that like brand themselves as like stoner humor, but
Mhm.
they're kind of just in branding and they're trying to appeal to that culture when there are other stoner films outright. Like, I watched something like Grandma's Boy, and I know that was meant, or not even meant, that was probably created by people who were high at the time, and it was meant to be watched by high people. So I felt like I was not at the time, but I felt like Hansel and Gretel Gets Baked fits into that mold. So I was curious to hear how it did play to that demographic.
Yeah, for sure. And, it kind of reminds me too of Half Baked. It's one of those comedy films where, I mean, everything just pertains to, that mindset and that culture, which is, fine. I mean, it's fun. And you also don't have to it's not a deep movie. It's not a heady movie. It's not cerebral. So, I mean, it's just something you can kick back and watch, and laugh about. And they know that and they want you to laugh is the thing. And that's what's kind of refreshing about it too, is that I think if it took itself too seriously, it wouldn't work, you know?
Yeah.
But they had fun with balancing the tone and delivering what they want and all of those themes. Even the opening sequence is really cool, how they had the opening title sequence with everyone in the production. The opening credits were all on the cover of like weed bottles and weed packages, and I actually kind of liked that. So there were some unique different ways that they sort of played with the film, just in that sense that I can appreciate too.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because I wanted to bring up the opening credits as well, and just having the producer's name and actor's name on dispensary bottles and stuff like that. Like,
Yeah.
it just plays everything kind of the right way, and it plays it in that funny enough manner where it's still a gimmick, I guess you could call it that, but it becomes the film's identity. It's not a gimmick for gimmick's sake. It's the identity of the film, and it actually helps to make it more unique. It makes it stand out, and again, I think that's one of the benefits of Hansel and Gretel Gets Baked. For as dumb as it may be and as silly as it may be, that's what it's going for, and that's what it wants to be. And when it punches the gore and when it punches those horror elements, it still works. You don't lose it to the immaturity of the rest of the film. Um, and yeah, if I was baked, I think once they mentioned Black Forest the first time, I would be Molly Sequin's character, just sitting there going like, "Holy fuck, I want that cake!" Like, so I'm happy I wasn't, because I think I'd be distracted as hell the whole time.
Dude, I want to go to the Cheesecake Factory. I haven't been in so long. I swear they referenced it so much. I was like, I could go for some Cheesecake Factory right now. Skittles sound good, but she was eating like the yellow ones off the ground, and I would just leave the yellow ones,
No,
honestly.
no yellow, green and red. Let's be
Yeah,
honest.
for sure.
I don't know. I don't know if we have. There's nothing else we can
Oh,
really
Matt.
say there other than I'm gonna go ahead and you can put this on the poster. Hansel and Gretel Get Baked is the sex, lies, and videotape of independent horror weed comedies. There it is.
That's what you
Fine.
decided on. Hansel and Gretel Gets Baked is the second Hansel and Gretel horror comedy that I like. Only to Hansel and Gretel Witch Hunters, because I just want to mention that again. I want to talk about that movie. I like that movie.
It's got
I
more
have
than
to
5
remember
reviews.
that. I haven't seen that before, but maybe I'll watch that before Perkins, brings his adaptation next year. Just do a Hansel and Gretel like marathon, get caught up in all the different like adaptations of this fairy tale.
If you do that, I still won't watch The Blackcoat's Daughter because I can't get into Oz Perkins.
What? Really?
Marissa, go pitch somebody a like. Here are all the Hansel and Gretel adaptations. Donato, go sit in the corner in timeout. Um, yeah, I think we've established what we need to do for everybody. Normally at the end of the show is where we would decide whether a movie kind of should remain forgotten or deserves a second chance. I sort of feel like in this case we all kind of know where we sit. I think the two of you are pretty clear in saying that Hansel and Gretel Get Baked is a movie that has a lot going for it. And I am just across the line on keep it in the canon. I don't want this one out, but man, I think like if I had had a headache or something during it, that might have been just enough to push me over. So maybe not for everybody, but certainly for us.
I mean, to mention though, it's got 3 positive and 1 negative, so it's not like one of those I've only reviewed it or it's only got negative reviews. I mean, that's a pretty good percentage for certified forgotten movies, honestly.
Do you have it open in front of you, the Rotten Tomatoes page?
I do. Yeah. What's up?
What are the other? Just out of curiosity, what are the outlets that gave it positive reviews?
So that was Blu-ray.com, Mr. Brian Orendorff, and Sean Monroe from What Culture.
Okay, all right. It's better than I thought. I thought it was going to be somebody's like home blogs. So I am.
No, yeah, it actually too. I mean, I've seen Orendorff. He does a lot of horror stuff, so I do trust the man. And Sean Monroe got kind of nicked for plagiarism on What Culture, so whatever.
So we're down to 2 positive.
So
reviews.
Fuck that guy.
Yeah, all right. And fuck this movie. Marisa, if people want to follow you on social media, they want to see what you're writing, connect with you online, talk about your social channels, talk about the best places to go to read your stuff.
Oh man, I'm honestly not that active on social media. I'm trying to get better about it, but I am on Twitter. You can follow me, just like my first and last name, Marisa_Mirabal. Yeah, that's what my handle is. And then the other social media outlets I keep private, but y'all are more than welcome to follow me on Twitter. And then I'll post stuff that I write and contribute for /film and Birth Movies Death, and every now and then a couple of other outlets that I'll write for. And I have an exciting piece coming up for Fangoria here in the next couple of issues. So if any of y'all are Fangoria subscribers, you can keep an eye out with that. And if you're not, you should subscribe. So yeah.
Nice. I didn't realize you had a piece coming up. I'm excited to read that.
Yeah, it's in the pipeline, but yeah, it'll be cool. So, I mean, again, Twitter, and that's where I'm at, like I communicate with you guys too. Just chat every now and then. I'm just not super involved in Twitter. I need to get better about it.
Yeah, you avoid the drama. You're not.
I was going to say, you don't need to get better about it. Trust me. No one's ever gotten better by going on Twitter more.
I don't know, man. Yeah, I've only had it for like a year and a half, and I got it the first time I think I covered South by, and I was like, okay, I guess I should finally get on Twitter. So
listen, like even one of my tweets today like went borderline viral. All I did is I tweeted out over the new Face Off remake. I'm like, yeah. Cast fucking Vanessa Kirby and Samara Weaving, you fucking cowards. And like it took off and I'm like, oh wow, cool, people agree with me. And then within like 5 minutes it was people going like, females in a face-off movie, blah blah blah. And I'm like, oh my god, I don't want to know all these terrible, terrible things on the internet. Like I like living in my bubble where I say something and no one says the evil shit. Like fuck Twitter.
Like I'll share my work and I'm into sharing other, writers' work and stuff. But yeah, I keep it pretty minimal. And then I'll, talk about music every now and then too. But yeah. That's cool. You want viral though.
More viral man.
Crazy.
Yeah, notice how he managed to drop that humble brag into the end of the episode.
Brag. So I got some more on my sleeve.
There you go.
Okay.
No, you're fine. No, you're good. So there you go. If you want your Twitter experience to #BeBest, follow Marisa. It's the nice side of film Twitter. Donato, if people want to just dive head first into the shallow end, like how do they follow you? Where do they go?
At least give me the deep end of Demon Wind. I am the deep end of Demon Wind Twitter and the gallows. And yes, you can find me as always at Donato Bomb on the Twitter and the Instagram and Letterboxd. You can find my writing on /film. You can find my writing on Play Disgusting, Red Central, Flickering Myth, We Got This Covered, Adam Insider. And you can also find me in an upcoming issue of Fangoria as well. Hopefully the same one as Marisa, because I would like to be Fango Bros with you as well. So fingers crossed we'll cross paths on the print Fangoria issue. And otherwise, just, cool. You can just keep listening to Certified Forgotten to hear me just yell Demon Wind at random times.
It's true. It's the most important contribution we have in every episode. As a matter of fact, I think we should have a drinking game, which is just when Donato says Demon Wind in an episode, just drink until you wake up the next morning. Very simple game.
Yeah, because it's the only way that you'll get through one of our certified forgotten
The
episodes.
worst version of Drinking with the Dead that you'll ever find. As for me, you can find me on Twitter at Labsplice, LABSPLICE. I am not in an upcoming issue of Fangoria. I'm starting to feel a little left out here, folks. But I do pop up in other places. You'll find my stuff. It's not so bad. Enjoy it. Marisa, thank you so much for joining us this time. And if you're listening and you're part of the crew coming to Fantastic Fest, come say hi to all of us. I think this is going to hit pretty much that week. So come say hello.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate it, guys. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Can't wait to have you back sometime. And Matt, should I take us out how I always do?
After you, sir.
Demon wins!